this might be slightly disjointed because I've been kind of sitting in an occupied management suite all week. So anyway, we'll see how this goes. And we're still there. Best of all, the school have just agreed not to send in any bailiffs this weekend. So right, two things that happened in the last couple of weeks. Really, one thing, which is the bailout of the Irish economy. And I want to start with that because I think it reveals something very important about the entire crisis that we're in at the moment. The first part of it is that, of course, Ireland's bailed out. So, we're all supposed to, well, the EU and the IMF will be giving a load of cash to Ireland to basically then carry on cutting public spending, imposing austerity measures, doing, in fact, exactly the same things it's been doing for now since about 2008, when the crisis erupted in the first place. That's the first part of it. That's a bailout, continued austerity measures as a response to the ongoing financial and economic crisis. The second part is the UK's contribution to this. The rather extraordinary scene of George Osborne standing up and saying, well, we must help out our Irish friends. They're in terrible trouble. And that's why, despite the fact that apparently everything else that they can see is going to be cut, £7 billion can be found to bail out the Irish economy. Of course, there's uproar in his own party, lots and lots of harumphing about, this is the cosh of Brussels and the EU and oh dear and this sort of thing. And Osborne himself looking deeply uncomfortable with the whole situation. Really quite extraordinary, but I think it really sort of exposes the logic of what's going on here, the dynamic of what's taking place. Because Ireland itself has been something like, treated as something like a kind of laboratory animal for the last few decades. The first set of experiments, if you like, was about 15 years ago, when offered to Ireland was, okay, join the EU, get cheap borrowing over here, privatise things, drive corporation tax down to zero, and then as a result you get a massive property bubble, huge amounts of speculation taking place, the so-called Celtic tiger, which then turns to an absolute catastrophe as a result of the financial crisis in 2008, the global financial crisis. That collapses. That first experiment looked all right for a bit, but then turns into an absolute social catastrophe. The second experiment is, okay, that one didn't work. What we're going to do instead is just say cut everything you can see and keep cutting until eventually the economy will recover at some point because you've kind of paid off all your debts and this is a good thing to do. Now, this is the logic of austerity. The idea that you can get yourself out of a crisis by cutting spending in the economy. It's quite extraordinary to see a return of this, because this is precisely the logic that worsened the Depression in the 1930s. And what is being imposed on Ireland at the moment is 1930s economics. That's what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing imposed on Ireland at the moment. And it didn't work then, and it doesn't work now, and it won't work for the very simple reason that if you cut spending in the economy, there's no demand in that economy anymore. And if there's no demand in that economy, if nobody's going out buying things, no one can sell things to them. And if no one's selling anything, you can't employ people. And so you get trapped. You get trapped in this downward spiral. And yet, the only solution that is being offered by the EU and the IMF, and they know all this, by the way, any number of economists will turn up and tell you this, not even raging lefties, right? Joseph Stiglitz, a decent economist, won the Nobel Prize, eminently respectable, points out this logic. Martin Wolf, one-time Thatcherite, has consistently said you cannot cut your way out of a crisis. It's kind of crackers. We tried it in the 30s. It doesn't work. And yet the only solution that's being offered to the crisis, both here and in Ireland, across the EU, is precisely that business of cut, cut, cut all the time. Now, why is this? And this is why, actually, Osborne had to make the bailout. He had to make the bailout because it's not a bailout of Ireland. It's not helping out our poor Irish neighbours, or whatever the expression he used was. Not that at all. The reason he made the bailout is that British banks have £150 billion worth of debt tied up in Ireland. So it's not a bailout of the Irish economy. It's not something that's supposed to help people in Ireland. It's something that's supposed to help people in the City of London. That's what's taken place here. That is the grim logic we're now trapped in. That the cuts have to be enforced. The welfare state that everybody here wants to support and be a part of, that we all assumed would always be here, has to be attacked fundamentally because we are trapped in a world where a dysfunctional financial system cannot recover properly, cannot sort its own problems out, and has to be continually bailed out. And to deal with those continual bailouts, and I believe there will be more, You have to attack public spending. The financial system is completely unreformed. When the bailouts happened first, all that took place was we handed over a load of government borrowing to the city, to the banks, and they just carried on entirely as normal. Mervyn King, in a speech in New York 3 weeks ago, raised precisely this problem. Mervyn King, Governor of the Bank of England, says, we've not reformed the financial system, there will be another financial crisis. And if there's another financial crisis, because the system is unreformed, we will be expected to make another bailout. So the cuts are happening here because of this. We're being asked to cut today to deal with the crisis tomorrow that they anticipate. So if we want to stop the cuts, and I'll finish in this, if we want to stop the cuts, the way to do this is to stop the city, change the city, transform finance in this country. That will break this logic. At the moment, because we have not tackled the greed and the stupidity and the gambling in the City of London, in the financial system, we will be asked to cut and cut and cut again. We'll be asked to cut because they will end up in another crisis, and we will then be expected to carry the can. That's why these cuts are happening. So we want to stop the cuts. Yes, we must resist them right now, but we must also understand we have to break this logic at the heart of the British economy. We have to break the city. We have to transform it. We have to turn finance not into something that spivs and speculators can make vast sums of money out of, but into something that actually delivers what people want. Start funding public infrastructure, new hospitals, new schools. Start delivering the things that people actually want and need. And until we reform the city, until we transform the way finance operates in the British economy, we will be expected to cut and cut and cut again.